The kitchen faucet dripped like a metronome counting down to my doom. I twisted the wrench one more time, muttering curses at the ancient plumbing in our two-story colonial. If sarcasm was a superpower, I'd be ruling the world instead of fixing leaky pipes at 42. "Dad's such a loser." My daughter Zoe's voice drifted from the dining room. "Eric makes Mom actually smile. When's the last time you made anyone happy?" I froze, wrench suspended mid-turn. Through the thin walls of our supposedly perfect suburban home, I caught fragments of their conversation like shrapnel. "Real men don't whine about their hardware store going under." Natalie's voice, my wife of 18 years, sharp as broken glass. "They adapt. They fight." The wrench slipped from my grip, clattering into the sink. "Welcome to Millbrook, Massachusetts, where perfect lawns hide rotting marriages and everyone pretends their life isn't falling apart behind white picket fences. I'm Jake Morrison, former amateur boxer turned failing hardware store owner. My wife Natalie designs buildings that actually get built, while I sell screws and paint to weekend warriors who probably earn more in bonuses than I make all year. The irony isn't lost on me. She creates things. I just help people fix what's broken. "Dinner!" Natalie called, her voice artificially bright. I dried my hands and walked into our dining room, where the mahogany table my mother-in-law bought us gleamed under the chandelier. Zoe sat scrolling through her phone, 17 years old and already an expert at making me feel invisible. Natalie bustled around, setting down plates with the efficiency of someone who'd rather be anywhere else. Then Eric walked in. Eric Donovan, my so-called friend from Murphy's boxing gym. Tall, lean, with the kind of easy confidence that came from never having to worry about mortgage payments or teenage daughters who posted TikToks about your failures. He'd been showing up to our family dinners more and more lately, always with some excuse about being between apartments or needing a home-cooked meal. "Jake, buddy," he said, clapping me on the shoulder. "How's the store?" "Still standing," I replied, taking my usual seat. "Unlike your last 3 jobs." Eric laughed, but his eyes stayed cold. He sat down next to Natalie, close enough that their shoulders touched. Too close. We ate in relative silence. Natalie's famous pot roast, though she'd stopped making it famous around the time she started working late 3 nights a week. Zoe live-streamed our dinner to her followers, narrating our family dysfunction for teenage entertainment. "This is so awkward," she whispered to her phone. "Like, the tension could power our whole house." Halfway through the meal, Natalie stood up. Her face was flushed, hands trembling slightly. She cleared her throat. "I have something to tell everyone. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories." The room went quiet, except for the tick of the grandfather clock in the hallway. Even Zoe looked up from her screen. "I'm engaged to Eric," Natalie announced, her voice steady now. "We've been together for months. I'm filing for divorce next week." Zoe gasped and immediately started recording. Eric reached for Natalie's hand, grinning like he'd won the lottery. I didn't flinch. Instead, I pulled out my phone and opened the photo gallery. Weeks ago, I'd noticed Eric spending way too much time in the gym's locker room, always on his phone. So I'd installed a tiny camera behind the lockers. Nothing illegal, just pointed at the common area. What I found wasn't Eric texting my wife. It was Eric taking very compromising photos of himself, the kind he'd been sending to at least 3 different women based on the timestamps, including Mrs. Patterson from down the street, who happened to be married to the police chief. I airdropped the most revealing photo directly to Eric's phone. His phone buzzed. He glanced down casually, then his face went white as fresh paint. The color drained so fast I thought he might pass out. Eric stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the hardwood floor. "I can't do this," he stammered, looking anywhere but at Natalie. This is wrong. I'm sorry, Nat. I can't marry you." He grabbed his jacket and practically ran for the door, leaving Natalie standing there with her mouth open. "What just happened?" Zoe whispered to her phone camera. Natalie turned to me, her eyes blazing. "You bastard! What did you do?" I cut another piece of pot roast, chewing slowly. "Pass the potatoes, please." She screamed something unrepeatable and stormed out, slamming the front door hard enough to rattle the windows. Car tires screeched in our driveway. Zoe stared at me. "Dad, what the hell?" "Language," I said mildly, "and maybe don't live stream family drama next time." She huffed and stomped upstairs, probably to post a TikTok about toxic fathers or whatever was trending. I finished my dinner alone, savoring each bite. The pot roast was actually pretty good. Later, as I walked out to get the mail, I found a note tucked under my windshield wiper. The paper was bright red, like someone had used a marker meant for warning signs. "You're finished. Stay away from her, or you'll regret it." The handwriting was Eric's. I'd seen it enough times on Jim's sign-up sheets. His E's always looked like backwards threes, and he pressed too hard with the pen. I folded the note carefully and slipped it into my wallet. Evidence was always useful. Standing in my driveway, looking at our house with its perfect landscaping and fresh paint, I realized something had shifted inside me. For months, I'd been the victim. The bumbling husband who couldn't keep his wife happy, the failed businessman watching his store circle the drain, the punching bag for everyone's frustration. But Eric had just made a crucial mistake. He'd threatened me, and I'd learned a long time ago in the boxing ring that the most dangerous opponent was the one who had nothing left to lose. The next morning brought the kind of gray October sky that made everything look washed out and tired. I opened Morrison's Hardware at 7 sharp, same as always, even though we'd had exactly 3 customers the previous day. The bell above the door chimed its lonely greeting to an empty store. My phone buzzed constantly, texts from neighbors, calls from Natalie's friends, messages from people I hadn't heard from in years. Word traveled fast in Millbrook, especially when it involved public humiliation at a dinner table. "Jake, what happened last night?" My sister Lisa's voice crackled through the phone. She worked as a private investigator in Boston, tough as nails and twice as sharp. "Zoe's TikTok is going viral. Something about Eric running away?" "Eric got cold feet," I said, organizing screws that didn't need organizing. "Turns out he wasn't ready for marriage after all." "Bullshit. What did you do?" Lisa knew me too well. We'd grown up in this town, survived our father's drinking and our mother's endless disappointment. She'd escaped to the city. I'd stayed and married the first woman who seemed impressed by my amateur boxing trophies. "I showed him some pictures," I admitted. "What kind of pictures?" "The kind that make married police chiefs very unhappy with their wives' personal trainers." Lisa was quiet for a moment. "Jake, be careful. Cornered animals bite back." She was right, but I was past caring about being careful. That afternoon, Zoe came home from school with red eyes and a chip on her shoulder the size of Massachusetts. "Everyone's talking about us," she snapped, throwing her backpack on the kitchen counter. "Madison's mom says you're having a mental breakdown. Tyler posted a meme about our family with crying, laughing emojis." "Where's your mother?" "Staying at Aunt Jen's. She says she can't look at you right now." Jen Hartley, Natalie's best friend since college. Perfect house, perfect husband, perfect kids who never embarrassed her on social media. She'd always treated me like something Natalie had scraped off her shoe. That evening, I drove to the Black Lantern, the kind of dive bar where the floor stuck to your shoes and the regulars knew everyone's business before they did. Mike O'Sullivan tended bar most nights. He'd been my boxing coach back when I thought I might actually make something of myself. "Well, well," Mike said as I slid onto a bar stool. "If it isn't the man of the hour. Heard you caused quite a scene at dinner last night." "News travels fast. Faster when your daughter broadcasts it to 10,000 followers." He poured me a whiskey without asking. So what's the plan, Jake? You gonna let them drag you through the mud, or are you gonna fight back? What makes you think I'm not fighting back already? Mike grinned, revealing teeth stained by 40 years of coffee and cigarettes. Because I know that look. Same look you had right before you knocked out Tommy Henderson in the Golden Gloves. The whiskey burned going down, but it warmed something cold that had settled in my chest. Eric left me a love note, told me to stay away from Natalie or I'd regret it. And? I don't respond well to threats. Mike leaned across the bar, lowering his voice. What do you need? That's why I liked Mike. No judgment, no lectures about taking the high road. Just a simple question about what I needed to win. Information, I said. Eric's got secrets. Everyone does. I'll ask around. But Jake? Mike's expression grew serious. Don't get mad. Get even. The next few days passed in a blur of humiliation. Natalie had turned our friends against me with surgical precision. I was the controlling husband who'd sabotaged her happiness, the bitter man who couldn't stand to see his wife succeed. The story changed depending on who was telling it, but I was always the villain. Zoe's TikToks about our family drama racked up views. She'd found her niche as the teenager with the dysfunctional parents, and her followers ate it up. Comments ranged from sympathy to outright mockery of my pathetic revenge attempt. But I wasn't sitting idle. Lisa had connections throughout New England, people who owed her favors or needed information themselves. Within 48 hours, she'd compiled a file on Eric that would make a FBI profiler proud. Your friend Eric's been busy, she said, sliding a manila folder across the table at our usual diner. Gambling debts to some very impatient people in Providence. 3 different women he's been stringing along, including a city councilwoman's daughter, and get this, he's been skimming from the gym's petty cash to cover his poker losses. I flipped through bank statements, photos, text message screenshots. Eric wasn't just a cheater, he was a small-time con artist, living way beyond his means. There's more, Lisa continued. Your wife's been bending some rules at work. Nothing criminal, but she's been approving building permits for projects that should have gone through additional review. Projects that happen to be designed by firms that Eric has connections to. She's been helping him? More like he's been using her. Classic manipulation. Make her feel special, then gradually ask for small favors that get bigger over time. The pieces were falling into place. Eric hadn't fallen for my wife. He'd targeted her. A successful architect with the authority to cut through red tape, married to a man he probably saw as weak and distracted. Friday night was Zoe's school talent show. I'd planned to skip it. The last thing I needed was more public humiliation, but something made me change my mind. Maybe it was stubbornness, or maybe I was just tired of hiding. The school auditorium was packed with parents holding phones, ready to record their children's performances for social media. I found a seat in the back, trying to blend into the shadows. That's when Eric walked in. He was with Natalie, playing the supportive stepfather-to-be for everyone to see. They sat 3 rows ahead of me, Eric's arm around my wife's shoulders like he owned her. During intermission, I got up to use the restroom. Eric was waiting by the water fountain, his smile sharp as a knife. Jake, he said, didn't expect to see you here. It's my daughter's school. For now. He stepped closer, and I caught a whiff of expensive cologne mixed with nervous sweat. You think you're clever, don't you? That little stunt with the photo? I think you're a coward who runs away when things get complicated. Eric's face flushed. You have no idea what you're dealing with. Stay away from Natalie or what? I interrupted. You'll write me another threatening note? Before he could answer, I stepped sideways and stuck out my foot. Eric, gesturing angrily, walked right into it and went down hard, his coffee cup flying through the air and dousing his crotch with hot liquid. Oh no, I said loudly. Are you okay? That looked like it hurt. Parents turned to stare as Eric writhed on the floor, coffee staining his expensive khakis in a very unfortunate pattern. Natalie rushed over, but I was already walking away. "You clumsy idiot!" Eric shouted, scrambling to his feet. "You did that on purpose!" He lunged at me, but two other fathers stepped between us. The whole scene was captured by at least a dozen phones, including Zoe's, who watched from the auditorium doorway with something that might have been pride. "Gentlemen, please," the principal intervened. "This is a school event." Eric was escorted outside to clean up, Natalie trailing behind him like a loyal dog. I returned to my seat and enjoyed the rest of the show, applauding loudly when Zoe performed her monologue about family loyalty. Later that night, I found my car vandalized in the school parking lot. "Loser" was spray-painted across the hood in bright red letters, the same red as Eric's threatening note. But as I stood there looking at the damage, I realized something had changed. The other parents weren't avoiding me, they were watching Eric with suspicion. A man who'd attack someone at a school event, who'd make a scene in front of children, wasn't the kind of person they wanted around their families. Zoe's latest TikTok had a different tone, too. "My dad might be going through it," she told her camera, "but at least he doesn't throw tantrums like a toddler." The tide was starting to turn. I pulled out my phone and called the auto body shop. "I need my car repainted," I told them, "and I want it to look better than new." The next morning, I woke up with the kind of clarity that comes after a good night's sleep and a better plan. Eric wanted to play dirty. I'd been fighting dirty since before he learned to tie his shoes. Murphy's boxing gym opened at 5 a.m., and I was waiting in the parking lot when old Murphy himself unlocked the doors. The gym smelled like sweat, leather, and dreams that had been beaten into submission. I'd spent hundreds of hours here as a young man, learning that the secret to winning wasn't hitting harder, it was hitting smarter. "Jake Morrison," Murphy wheezed, his voice roughened by decades of shouting over the sound of gloves hitting bags. "Heard you've been having some domestic troubles." "Nothing I can't handle." Murphy studied me with eyes that had seen every kind of fighter walk through his doors. "Eric Donovan's been coming around, talking trash about you. Says you're losing your mind. What do you think?" "I think Eric's got soft hands and a big mouth. Always did." Murphy spit into a coffee can. "Also think he's been helping himself to the petty cash. Been meaning to set up a camera, catch whoever's been skimming." I smiled. "Want some help with that?" By noon, I had a tiny wireless camera hidden behind the water cooler, with a perfect view of the cash box Murphy kept for gym fees and equipment rentals. The camera fed directly to an app on my phone, recording everything in high definition. Eric showed up that afternoon, same as always. He worked out for exactly 45 minutes, just long enough to maintain his physique without actually breaking a sweat, then headed for the locker room. I watched on my phone as he glanced around, making sure he was alone, then opened the cash box and palmed 2 20s. He'd done this before. His movements were smooth, practiced. But I wasn't done yet. While Eric was in the shower, I slipped into the locker room and opened his gym bag. Inside, along with his designer workout clothes and protein supplements, I found a small plastic bag containing white pills. Not steroids. I knew what those looked like, but something else. I took photos of everything, then carefully placed a few of the pills in a small evidence bag I'd borrowed from Lisa's PI kit. The rest went back exactly where I'd found them. That evening, I made 2 phone calls. The first was to Murphy. "Check your security camera footage from this afternoon," I told him, "around 3:30 near the cash box." The second was to an old friend who worked at a pharmacy. "I need these pills identified," I said, describing what I'd found. Quietly. Friday afternoon brought answers. The pills were Adderall, a controlled substance Eric definitely didn't have a prescription for. And Murphy had watched the security footage 3 times before calling Eric and banning him from the gym permanently. 30 years I've been running this place," Murphy told me later. "Never had someone steal from me and then act like they were doing me a favor by showing up." But my real masterpiece was still in planning. Jen Hartley was throwing herself a birthday party that Saturday. One of those elaborate affairs that was really an excuse to show off her perfect house and perfect life to everyone in town. Natalie would be there, playing the victim of her terrible husband's mental breakdown. Eric would probably show up too, despite being uninvited, because he couldn't resist an audience. I wasn't invited either, but that had never stopped me before. Saturday evening, I parked 2 blocks away and walked through the Hartleys' backyard like I owned the place. The party was in full swing, 50 or so people mingling on the back deck, drinking wine and pretending to care about each other's problems. I could see Natalie through the sliding glass doors, holding court in the living room. She'd done her hair and makeup perfectly, playing the role of the wronged wife with Academy Award precision. Eric lurked nearby, trying to look supportive, while avoiding eye contact with anyone who might ask uncomfortable questions. I pulled out my phone and connected to the Bluetooth speaker system Jen used for her parties. The password was taped to the bottom of the speaker, Jen's B-Day 2023, because even perfect people made stupid mistakes. Then I played the audio file Lisa had helped me create. It started quietly, just background noise that made people glance around curiously. Then Natalie's voice filled the backyard, crystal clear through the premium sound system. "I can't keep doing this, Eric. Jake's getting suspicious." Eric's voice answered, "So leave him. You said you were going to file for divorce." "It's not that simple. He knows about the building permits. If he talks to my boss, he won't. Jake's too pathetic to fight back. He'll just sulk and drink beer and feel sorry for himself." The conversation continued, revealing Eric's gambling debts, his plan to use Natalie's connections to secure construction contracts, and several very unflattering comments about the people currently standing frozen in Jen's backyard. I'd edited the audio carefully, using real conversations Lisa had recorded through a bug in Natalie's car, mixed with similar voices from online sources. Nothing illegal, nothing fabricated, just the truth, presented in a way that couldn't be ignored. The party went silent, except for the sound of my wife's voice describing how easy it had been to manipulate her husband and how much she looked forward to taking half his assets in the divorce. Through the window, I watched Natalie's face go white. Eric tried to reach for the speaker, but 3 different men blocked his path. Someone shouted for Jen to turn it off, but Jen was standing in the corner with a strange smile on her face, like she was enjoying the show. That was interesting. I slipped away before anyone thought to look for the source of their entertainment, but not before I saw Natalie run for her car with tears streaming down her face. Eric followed, shouting apologies that fell on deaf ears. The audio file would be all over social media by morning. Zoe's TikTok followers would have a field day, and the local Facebook groups would dissect every word like biblical scholars studying scripture. But as I drove home, I kept thinking about Jen's smile. She'd looked satisfied, like she'd been waiting for something exactly like this to happen. Sunday morning brought the fallout. My phone rang constantly. Reporters from the local paper, friends wanting gossip, neighbors pretending to offer support while fishing for details. I let them all go to voicemail. Natalie came home around noon, looking like she hadn't slept. Her perfect makeup was smeared, her designer dress wrinkled. "We need to talk," she said. "Do we?" "That recording, how did you get it?" I looked up from the newspaper I wasn't really reading. "Does it matter? Was any of it untrue?" She couldn't meet my eyes. "Jake, I never meant for things to go this far. Eric, he convinced me that you didn't care anymore, that you were holding me back." "And the building permits?" "That was his idea. He said it was just cutting through red tape, helping good projects get approved faster. For a percentage of the profits." Natalie nodded miserably. "I didn't know about the gambling, or the other women. I thought he loved me." For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. "Where is he now?" "Gone. Packed up and left town this morning. Said he couldn't handle the pressure." I folded the newspaper carefully. "And what about you, Natalie? Can you handle the pressure?" She looked at me with something that might have been hope. Maybe we could try counseling? Start over? Start over? I laughed, and the sound was harsh even to my own ears. You threw away 18 years of marriage for a con artist who was using you to line his pockets. You turned our daughter against me and tried to destroy my reputation in this town. And now you want to start over? Jake, please, get out. This is my house too. I stood up, and for the first time in months, I felt like the man I used to be. The one who'd never backed down from a fight, even when he was outmatched. Not anymore, I said quietly. Check your email. Lisa filed the divorce papers this morning. You've got 30 days to find somewhere else to live. Natalie stared at me like I'd grown a second head. You can't be serious. I'm done being the victim in this story, Natalie. From now on, I'm writing my own ending. She left without another word, and I heard her car pull out of the driveway for what I hoped would be the last time. But even as I savored my victory, I couldn't shake the image of Jen's smile at the party. Something about her reaction bothered me, like a splinter I couldn't quite work free. I called Lisa. I need you to dig deeper into Jen Hartley, I told her. Something's not right about her involvement in all this. What kind of something? The kind that makes me think I've been fighting the wrong enemy. Lisa called me back on Tuesday with information that made my coffee taste like ashes. Jake, sit down, she said. This is bigger than we thought. I was already sitting in my office at the hardware store, surrounded by inventory that wasn't moving and bills that weren't getting paid. How much bigger? Jen Hartley didn't just know about the affair, she orchestrated it. I found emails going back 8 months, Jake. She introduced Eric to Natalie at that charity auction, remember? Set up their first accidental meeting at the coffee shop. Even suggested Natalie invite him to family dinners. The room started spinning. Why would she do that? Because you fired her 3 years ago. The memory hit me like a punch to the gut. Jen had worked part-time at Morrison's Hardware during the summers, handling the books and customer service. She'd been embezzling small amounts, 20 here, 50 there, nothing that would bankrupt me but enough to pay for her expensive habits. When I caught her and let her go, she'd sworn she'd make me pay. I'd forgotten about it. Apparently, she hadn't. She's been planning this for years, Lisa continued. Eric wasn't some random guy who fell for your wife. Jen found him, researched his background, probably fed him information about Natalie's vulnerabilities. She knew exactly which buttons to push. The recording at the party. She wanted that to happen. Look at the guest list, Jake. Everyone who matters in this town was there. Everyone who could spread the story and destroy Natalie's reputation along with yours. I felt sick, not because I was sorry for Natalie, she'd made her choices, but because I'd been dancing to Jen's tune without even knowing it. There's more, Lisa said quietly. Jen's husband doesn't know about any of this. She's been using their joint accounts to pay Eric, finance his lifestyle, keep him interested in the game. If he finds out, he'll divorce her, and she'll lose everything. Exactly. She's been living beyond their means for months, all to fund this elaborate revenge scheme. She's desperate, Jake, and desperate people do stupid things. That afternoon, I drove to Eric's apartment complex, only to find it empty. The landlord confirmed he'd skipped town without paying his last month's rent, leaving behind nothing but empty beer bottles and unpaid bills. But I had a feeling he wasn't gone for good. Men like Eric didn't just disappear. They regrouped, made new plans, found new angles to work. I was right. Thursday evening, Zoe came home from school with news that made my stomach drop. Mom's in the hospital, she said, throwing her backpack down with more force than necessary. Jen called. She had some kind of accident. We drove to Millbrook General in silence, Zoe staring out the window while I tried to process what this meant. The hospital parking lot was full of familiar cars. Half the town had apparently heard the news. Natalie was in room 314, looking small and fragile in the hospital bed. Her left arm was in a cast, and she had a bandage wrapped around her head. "What happened?" I asked Jen, who was hovering nearby like a concerned friend. "Car accident," Jen said, not quite meeting my eyes. "She hit a tree on Maple Street. The police think she fell asleep at the wheel." But Natalie was awake now, and when she saw me, her eyes filled with tears. "Jake," she whispered. "It wasn't an accident." Jen's face went rigid. "You're confused, honey. The concussion—" "Eric came back," Natalie continued, ignoring her. "He was waiting in my car when I left work. Said he needed money to leave town permanently. When I refused, he grabbed the wheel." The room went quiet, except for the beeping of medical equipment. "Where is he now?" I asked. "I don't know. He ran when other cars stopped to help." I looked at Jen, who was backing toward the door. "Funny thing about Eric," I said conversationally. "For a guy who's supposedly desperate to leave town, he sure keeps coming back." "I don't know what you mean," Jen said. "Sure you do. You're still paying him, aren't you? Still funding this whole operation because you can't let go of a grudge from 3 years ago." Jen's mask finally slipped. The concerned friend disappeared, replaced by something cold and calculating. "You destroyed my reputation in this town," she hissed. "Made me look like a thief in front of everyone I knew. Do you have any idea what that did to my marriage, my friendships? You were stealing from me. $50 here and there. You were barely keeping the store afloat anyway. But no, you had to make a big production out of it. Had to tell everyone what I'd done." I hadn't told everyone. I'd been discreet, only mentioning it to a few mutual friends when they asked why Jen wasn't working for me anymore. But in a town like Millbrook, discretion was relative. "So you decided to destroy my marriage in return." "I decided to show you what real consequences look like." Zoe was staring at Jen like she'd never seen her before. "You did this? You made Mom cheat on Dad?" "I didn't make her do anything," Jen snapped. "I just gave her better options." That's when Eric walked into the room. He looked terrible, unshaven, clothes wrinkled, eyes darting around like a cornered animal. But he was smiling, and that made him more dangerous than ever. "Well, well," he said. "The whole family's here. How touching." "Eric, you need to leave," Jen said quickly. "We talked about this." "Did we? Because I remember you promising me another 10,000 to disappear permanently. But your check bounced, Jen. Turns out your husband froze the accounts when he found out about your little shopping sprees." Jen went white. "You said you'd wait." "I'm done waiting. And I'm done being your trained monkey." Eric pulled out his phone and started typing. "Let's see how many people are interested in the real story behind Millbrook's juiciest scandal." He was posting to social media, I realized, probably uploading screenshots of his conversations with Jen, evidence of the money she'd paid him, proof of the conspiracy they'd built around my family. "Stop." Jen lunged for his phone, but Eric was younger and faster. "The truth's already out there," he said, grinning. "Every dirty detail of how Jennifer Hartley paid me to seduce her best friend's husband. How she planned the whole thing as revenge for getting fired from a job she was stealing from anyway." Jen was crying now, mascara running down her cheeks. "My husband will leave me, my kids. Should have thought of that before you decided to play puppet master with other people's lives." Eric pocketed his phone and looked at me. "No hard feelings, Jake. It was just business." "Business?" I stood up, and Eric took a step back. "You put my wife in the hospital. She grabbed the wheel first. I was just trying to get away." That's when I hit him. I hadn't thrown a punch in anger for 15 years, but muscle memory kicked in. My right cross caught Eric square on the jaw, spinning him around and sending him crashing into the visitor's chair. "Dad!" Zoe shouted, but she didn't sound upset. She sounded impressed. Eric struggled to his feet, holding his jaw. "You'll pay for that." "No," I said quietly. "I'm done paying for things. You want to press charges? Go ahead. But first you'll have to explain to the police why you were harassing my wife and causing car accidents." Eric looked around the room, at Natalie in her hospital bed, at Zoe recording everything on her phone, at Jen sobbing in the corner, at me standing over him with my fists still clenched. "This isn't over," he muttered. "Yes, it is. But I was wrong. It wasn't over yet." The next morning brought news that Eric had been arrested trying to break into Jen's house. Apparently he'd decided that if she couldn't pay him, he'd take what he thought he was owed. Jen's husband had come home early from a business trip and found Eric ransacking their bedroom, looking for jewelry and cash. The whole story came out then. 3 years of planning, months of manipulation, thousands of dollars spent on an elaborate revenge scheme that had destroyed multiple families and accomplished nothing except proving that small-town grudges could grow into something monstrous. But there was still one more act to play out. The annual Millbrook Community Block Party was scheduled for Saturday, rain or shine. It was the kind of event that defined our little town, neighbors gathering in the park, sharing food and gossip, pretending we were all one big happy family. This year, I had something special planned for the festivities. Saturday dawned clear and cold, the kind of October morning that made the maple trees look like they were on fire. I dressed carefully, clean jeans, my old Murphy's boxing gym t-shirt, and the leather jacket Lisa had given me for my 40th birthday. If this was going to be my final performance, I wanted to look the part. The Millbrook Community Block Party was already in full swing when I arrived at Memorial Park. Families clustered around picnic tables, kids ran between the game booths, and the smell of grilled burgers and funnel cake filled the air. The whole scene looked like something from a Norman Rockwell painting, if Rockwell had painted small-town scandals and social media drama. I spotted the usual suspects immediately. Mayor Thompson working the crowd like the politician he was, Mrs. Patterson from down the street avoiding eye contact with anyone who might bring up her text message relationship with Eric, and the Hendersons pretending their marriage wasn't falling apart after their own infidelity came to light during the recent gossip explosion. But the person I was really looking for was standing by the bandstand, trying to blend into the background. Jen Hartley looked like she'd aged 10 years in the past week. Her perfect hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, her designer clothes replaced with jeans and a sweater that had seen better days. Her husband had filed for divorce on Monday and taken the kids to his mother's house in Vermont. The perfect life she'd worked so hard to build had crumbled faster than Eric's fake charm. Natalie was there too, her arm still in a cast, but otherwise recovered from her accident. She'd been staying at a hotel since leaving the hospital, trying to figure out what came next. The divorce papers were signed, the house was on the market, and her job at the architecture firm was hanging by a thread while they investigated the building permit irregularities. Even Zoe had come, though she spent most of her time filming TikToks about small-town drama and how her family had become the most entertaining train wreck in Massachusetts. At 2 o'clock, Mayor Thompson took the stage for his annual State of Millbrook address. It was usually a boring recitation of municipal achievements and upcoming projects, but this year he seemed nervous, constantly glancing at the crowd like he expected trouble. He was right to be nervous. Halfway through his speech about the new traffic light on Main Street, I walked up to the stage. The mayor paused, microphone still in hand, as I climbed the steps. "Jake Morrison, everyone," I said, taking the microphone. "Some of you know me as the guy who owns the failing hardware store. Others know me as the husband who got publicly humiliated at his own dinner table. But today, I thought I'd share a different story." The crowd had gone quiet, phones appearing as people sensed something interesting was about to happen. See, for the past few months, I thought I was the victim of a cheating wife and a smooth-talking con man. Turns out, I was actually the target of something much more elaborate. A 3-year revenge plot orchestrated by someone I'd trusted, funded with stolen money, and executed with the kind of precision that would make a military strategist proud. I looked directly at Jen, who was trying to disappear behind a hot dog stand. Jennifer Hartley, ladies and gentlemen, the puppet master behind our little town's most entertaining scandal. Jen started moving toward the parking lot, but several people stepped into her path. Nobody was going to miss the conclusion of this story. Now, you might ask yourself, what kind of person spends 3 years and thousands of dollars destroying multiple families over a grudge about a part-time job? What kind of friend manipulates their best friend into an affair, then sits back and watches the whole thing explode? I pulled out my phone and connected to the park's PA system. The same trick I'd used at Jen's birthday party, but this time I'd gotten permission from the mayor's office earlier in the week. The kind of person who keeps detailed records of their crimes. The speakers crackled to life, and Jen's voice filled the park. "Eric, you need to push harder. Jake's starting to suspect something, but he's too weak to actually do anything about it. Make Natalie choose between them. Force the issue." Eric's voice responded, "What if she chooses him?" "She won't. I know exactly what buttons to push with Natalie. She's always resented being married to someone beneath her social status. Make her feel like she deserves better, and she'll convince herself that leaving him was her idea." The recording continued, revealing the extent of their conspiracy. How Jen had researched Eric's background, how she'd fed him information about our family, how she'd gradually escalated the situation until it reached the breaking point. But the best part came at the end. "What about the money?" Eric asked on the recording. "Don't worry about that. My husband thinks I'm investing in a boutique with my sister. He has no idea I'm spending it on destroying Jake Morrison's pathetic little life." The crowd was silent, except for the sound of children playing in the distance, oblivious to the adult drama unfolding around them. "Now," I continued, "some of you might think this makes me the victim. Poor Jake, manipulated by his wife's evil best friend. But here's the thing, I'm not a victim anymore." I pulled out a manila folder and held it up. "See, while Jen was busy playing games, I was doing some research of my own. Turns out revenge is a dish best served with proper documentation." I opened the folder and pulled out the first document. DNA test results, courtesy of a lab in Boston. Jen's youngest child, little Tommy, who everyone thinks looks so much like his father, well, he actually looks like Eric Donovan, probably because Eric is his father. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Jen's face went white as fresh snow. Seems our puppet master has been keeping some secrets of her own. The affair between Jen and Eric didn't start 8 months ago when they began targeting my family. It started 3 years ago, right around the time she was working at my store, right around the time she got pregnant with Tommy. I pulled out another document. Bank records showing that Jen has been embezzling from her husband's business accounts for years, not just recently. The money she used to pay Eric? It came from the college funds she and her husband set up for their kids. More papers scattered in the breeze as I held them up. Email records showing that Jen has been running similar schemes against other people in town. Remember when the Johnsons got divorced last year after those mysterious photos showed up in their mailbox? Or when Principal Martinez resigned after someone leaked his gambling problem to the school board? Our girl Jen has been busy. The crowd was getting restless now, angry murmurs rising as people realized the extent of Jen's manipulations. She'd been the town's unofficial gossip coordinator for years, and now they were learning that most of that gossip had been carefully orchestrated. "But my personal favorite," I said, pulling out the final document, "is this court order freezing all of Jen's assets pending investigation into her financial crimes. Seems the FBI takes embezzlement seriously, especially when it involves interstate wire transfers and tax evasion." That last part wasn't entirely true. The FBI wasn't involved yet. But Jen didn't know that. She broke then, pushing through the crowd and running for the parking lot. But she didn't make it far before she tripped over a picnic table and went down hard, her purse spilling open and scattering pills across the grass. The same kind of pills I'd found in Eric's gym bag. "Prescription fraud, too," I observed into the microphone. "Jen's been quite the busy little criminal." That's when her husband showed up. David Hartley looked like he'd driven straight from Vermont without stopping. His clothes were wrinkled, his hair was a mess, and his eyes had the hollow look of a man who'd just learned his entire life was a lie. He walked over to where Jen was struggling to get up, picked up one of the pill bottles, and read the label. Adderall, he said quietly. Prescribed to Jennifer Martinez. That's not your name, Jen. That's the principal's wife's name. Jen tried to run again, but this time David caught her arm. 3 years, he said. 3 years you've been lying to me. About the money, about Tommy, about everything. David, I can explain. No. His voice was calm, almost gentle. You can explain it to the lawyers, and the police, and our children when they're old enough to understand why Mommy isn't coming home. The crowd parted as David led Jen toward his car. She was crying now, mascara running down her cheeks, but nobody moved to help her. I stepped down from the stage and found myself face to face with Natalie. Jake, she said quietly. I'm sorry. For all of it. I know. Do you think, is there any chance we could try again, knowing what we know now? I looked at my wife, soon-to-be ex-wife, and felt something that might have been pity. No, Natalie. Some things can't be fixed. She nodded and walked away, probably to catch a ride with someone else since I'd driven her car to the impound lot earlier that morning. It was registered in both our names, and I'd reported it stolen after she'd used it to meet Eric behind my back. Zoe appeared at my elbow, still filming. Dad, that was epic. My followers are going crazy. Good. Maybe now they'll understand that your old man isn't as pathetic as he looks. She grinned and hugged me with one arm, still holding her phone with the other. So what happens now? She asked. I looked around the park, at the neighbors who were staring at me with something that might have been respect, at the empty stage where I'd just dismantled 3 years of careful manipulation in 15 minutes, at the town that would be talking about this day for years to come. Now, I said, now we go home and figure out what comes next. But as we walked toward the parking lot, I caught sight of Eric Donovan standing by the tree line, watching everything with that same predatory smile he'd worn at our dinner table. He'd made bail, and from the look in his eyes, he wasn't done with me yet. I smiled back at him, cracking my knuckles the way I used to before boxing matches. Let him come, I thought. I'm not the same man he tried to destroy. The ghost at the door had finally learned how to haunt back,